Good morning. Today we're going to read The Best Nest by P.D. Eastman. This is one of my favorite stories, and my kids love it too. You'll probably end up hearing them singing it as we continue to read. So, this is the front, the cover. This is the back, and this is the spine. Who do you see? You see Dr. Seuss on here? He helped publish this book. It's so good. You're going to love it. There they go. There's the birds with a whole bunch of stuff in their mouth. What do you think they're going to do with all that stuff? What are they going to do? Do you think that they're going to build a nest? I think you might be right. I have a picture. I'm going to send you 2 different pictures later. And it's going to show you, we have a mother bird that's living in her nest on our front porch. And I have a picture of a little tiny nest that we found in the yard, and it's so small it fits right in my hand. So do you think, I'm going to ask you this question, and I want you to all send me something back when we get there. But first, let's read the story, and then I'll send you the picture of the nest so you can see the difference. Okay, so let's begin. The Best Nest. Mr. Bird was so happy that he had to sing. I love my house, I love my nest, in all the world my nest is best. Look at Mother Bird. She's like, oh, I don't know about that. Then Mrs. Bird came out of the house. This is not the best nest, she said. But Daddy's like, what? Tired of this old place, said Mrs. Bird. I hate it. Let's go look for a new place right now. So they left that old place to look for a new one. This place looks nice, said Mr. Bird. Let's move in here. Look. See it? A hole in the tree. Does that seem like it'd be a good place for a bird to make their nest? But somebody else had already moved in. What is that? Is that a raccoon? Does he want 2 more birds living with him? I don't think so. So they looked at another house. This one looks nice, said Mr. Bird, and there's nobody in it. Wow. Do you think a good place to build a nest is in a boot? You're wrong, said Mrs. Bird. This house belongs to a foot. So they went on looking. I like this one, said Mr. Bird. It has a pretty red flag on the roof. I've always wanted a house with a flag, said Mrs. Bird. Maybe this place will be all right. Who are they trying to move into? They're trying to move into a mailbox? Do you think that's a good place for a bird to build a nest? But it was not all right. I guess I made a mistake, said Mr. Bird. You make too many mistakes, said Mrs. Bird. I'm going to pick the next place. And look where they're going. To the church. Gonna fly inside the church tower. Stop, Sophie. You're moving the whole table. They flew in and they looked around. Isn't it too big, said Mr. Bird. I like this big place, said Mrs. Bird. This is the place to build our new nest. Right there, on top of the bell. Think that's a good place? Make a prediction. What do you think? And they went right to work. They needed many things to build a nest. First, they got some hay. And they got some soda straw and some broom string. And they got some sweater string. They got some stocking string. And they got some mattress stuffing. They got some horse hair, and they got some man hair. And soon, they had all the hay, and all the straw, and all the string, and all the stuffing, and all the horse hair, and all the man hair that they could carry, and they took it back to build their nest. Look at all the stuff. Please stop. Mr. and Mrs. Bird worked very hard, and it took them the rest of the morning to finish their nest. This nest really is the best nest, said Mrs. Bird, and I want to live here forever. She seems very happy now. She's happy with this new nest. Mr. Bird was so happy. He flew to the top of his house and he began to sing his song again. I love our house, I love our nest. In all the world, our nest is best. He was so busy singing that he didn't see Mr. Parker coming. Every day at 12 o'clock, Mr. Parker came to the church. Mr. Parker came to pull a rope, and the rope went right up to the bird's new nest. What do you think that rope is gonna do? What do you think it's gonna do? The rope rang the big bell right under the bird's nest. It goes boing, boing, boing. How do you think that sounds? Do you think that sounds really quiet or really, really loud? From the looks of it, it looks really loud. Mrs. Bird got out of there as fast as she could fly with the bell going boing, 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 boing. Here comes Mr. Bird. When Mr. Bird came in, all he could see was a mess of hay and string and straws and horsehair and man hair. But where was Mrs. Bird? I will look for her until I find her, said Mr. Bird. He looked high, he looked low, he looked everywhere for Mrs. Bird. He looked down into a chimney, but Mrs. Bird wasn't there. He looked down into the water barrel, but Mrs. Bird wasn't there.
Are you making a cake, Sophie?
But then he saw a big fat cat, and there was a smile on that fat cat's face. And there were some pretty brown feathers near that fat cat's mouth. Mr. Bird began to cry. Oh, dear. This big fat cat has eaten Mrs. Bird. Oh, no. Mr. Bird flew off. I'll never see Mrs. Bird again, he cried. And it began to get dark. And it began to rain. And it rained harder and harder. Mr. Bird could not see where he was going. He's really sad. He thought Mrs. Bird was gone forever. That would be very sad. And then, crash! Mr. Bird bumped into something. It was his old house. That old house that Mrs. Bird hated. I'll go inside, said Mr. Bird, and I'll rest here until the rain stops. And Mr. Bird went in. And there was Mrs. Bird sitting there singing, I love my house, I love my nest, in all the world my nest is best. You? Here? He gasped. I thought you hated this old nest.
Look at it.
Look at her face. Does she look happy? Do you think she likes her nest now? Mrs. Bird smiled. I used to hate it, she said, but a mother bird can change her mind. You see, there's no nest like an old nest for a brand new bird. Oh, look, they have an egg. How many?
One.
Just one. And then the egg popped open and the new bird thought so too. The end. Did you love that book? Will you draw me a picture of your favorite part? Was your favorite part when the birds were searching for their new nest and they looked in the tree and they looked in the mailbox and the boot, and then finally they made their nest inside the church tower on top of the bell. But it was beautiful and they had lots of space, but was it perfect? No, it was so loud, and that is too loud for two birds to live in. So they ended up going back to that very first house that Mrs. Bird hated. So please take your time, draw me a nice pretty picture, and have Mommy and Daddy send it to me so I can see what you're up to. Again, I miss you guys, and I can't wait for this whole thing to be over so we can get back to seeing each other on a daily basis. Bye, guys.